I think that's something that, it brings the audience into intimate moments, and that is one of them, right? It's very close, it's very personal, it's very it's stuff when you watch what our, society wants and demands, it's more authenticity, and it's more intimacy, and it's more, uh, "Take me with you," that kind of thing.
Hello, everyone. This is Tim Galvin from Shovel the Sidewalk, hosting Sidewalk Talk today. We are joined with the two usuals, Steve Fortunato and Jamie Catania. And today we are welcoming a very special guest, Mr. Brandon Miller, the VO craftsman, voice actor. Brandon, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So yeah, we at Shovel the Sidewalk believe a lot in the power of sound, and in my belief, a voice actor relies almost entirely on the power of sound because they are going to project their voice onto a character narration, and it lends itself to using sound to create a story with your voice. So before we get into that, I did want to do a couple fun questions for you.
Mm.
Um, One thing is, I see you worked in the craft beer field. Um, I believe my wife and I are hazy IPA connoisseurs. So do you have a favorite type of beer? And if so, do you have a favorite brand and maybe the name of that? Tell me about it.
Yeah, yeah, I tell you what, so I consider myself a mood drinker, kind of like what I'm in the mood for, right? So my
Hmm.
my favorite changes like on a daily basis, weekly
Gotcha.
basis, monthly basis. But I'll share with you kind of my what I call my aha beer moment when I thought, craft beer's for me. So there was a beer called La Folie, which is from New Belgium Brewing Company,
Oh,
and it's a Belgian style ale that's aged in oak barrels, and it's got kind of some sour character.
mhm.
And I remember after having that and having experiences where it's like, yeah, I kind of knew what pale ales were, brown ales, things like that, but nothing really stood out to me
Mhm.
until I had that. And I was like, wow, that's beer.
Yeah, right.
That's interesting. And that kind of, I fell down this rabbit hole and discovered Belgian beer. And that was something that I was really into. So anytime I can find a good Belgian ale, that's something that I will look for and
Mhm.
and probably order.
Awesome. Um, I see you're also a music fan, and I never like to ask people what their favorite band is because no one can really pick one. But what I do like to ask is currently, what kind of band are you connecting with and listening to right now?
Got it. I thought we were just going to go through my Spotify list right now, and we were just going to look through it all.
Yeah,
So which you would be like, who is this dude? I mean, it's so it's
it's all
so
over.
random. Um, so some of the music that I'm into right now
Mhm.
is stuff from the 1940s, and also I'm also into kind of the um, a lot of bands are recreating sounds of the 80s.
Yes, like
So I'm
synthwave.
really that synth wave kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
those are kind of the two things that I'm into right now, which is funny because they're so different. But if I had to
Oh.
choose an artist
Mhm.
that I pretty much never get tired of, it's Elvis.
Elvis. Okay,
Yeah.
nice. All right. So for voice acting, I particularly love voice actors. I think probably from the age of like when I was 20, it might have been like my dream job. I love like D. Bradley Baker, Billy West, John DiMaggio, Clancy Brown, particular Kevin Conroy as Batman always sticks out in my head as some of just the most powerful voices ever. Did you have anyone that you looked up to not named Mel Blanc when you were trying to become a voice actor?
Yeah, it's funny. All the names that you mentioned are all from the stuff we see on TV, right?
Yeah,
Animation, characters, and things like that. But the
right.
world of voiceover is so vast that it spans people we've never even heard their names.
Yeah.
But something that comes to mind, and I didn't think of this as like, oh, I could become the voice of this.
Gotcha.
But it was when I was younger, and be at my grandfather's house, and we'd be watching Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. And
Yeah.
I just loved the narrators. And I was like, wow, I just love they just kind of draw me in. I'm like in Africa in the safari. And I
Yeah.
just loved that. So that was kind of my first experience with, I suppose you could say, kind of the power of sound and how it just like transported me there. And I'm like, wow, I love that. And so that's always been in the back of my mind of like, I want other people to experience that.
Mhm. That's all. Yeah, that's it's really cool because you're right. Usually people just think of the big name voice actors that are in every single kid show because they just get recasted and recasted. But that's
What
awesome. That's really
you,
cool. That's an awesome angle to think about, you know, voice actors that we've never heard of or like you said, even experienced came in contact with. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I think
So
Tim, what about when he mentions Mutual of Omaha, I think of what's his NFL Films. John Facenda, is that his name? That's from like the 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
They talk
Yeah.
about frozen Lambeau
yeah.
Field and the music and walking out. That guy's voice
Yeah.
was incredible. And I think he attracted a lot of people to the NFL.
Mm.
I think NFL Films was a turning point for the NFL, talking about the power of sound.
Mhm.
And I remember, what's his name? Was the producer was I think Steve Sable was the son. I don't remember the father's name, but the original producer of NFL Films might have been Steve Sable as well. But I remember the son was Steve Sable. So, but he said the most what made NFL Films wasn't the video, it was the sound. And it's when they discovered the Nat sound that you and I would not normally hear as fans, but only sound that players or maybe coaches, people on the sidelines would hear.
Mhm.
And that's of, you know, the Nat sound of the pads hitting or inside the huddle or the coach talking to the coaches upstairs or on the field. Those are things that when you're in the stands with 70,000 people or on TV, and of course back then it's black and white, you don't really hear it. And he said that was the number one thing for NFL Films. And I really think NFL Films, once that took off, it brought so much attention to even more attention to the NFL. Because if you remember, well, way back, I mean, I'm not some football history buff, but now we're going on a kick here. I mean, college football was the thing, not the NFL.
Mhm.
College football is what people liked, and then eventually, because professionals, who wants to? They're a bunch of bums or whatever. So, but then it took off. It got better, and whenever that was in the 60s or and in the early 70s, with his voice, the iconic voice, the music, and they'd recap a season or the games, and the guy's voice just carried forever, and it'd work in all these Nat sound things. That's when I think NFL Films took off, but I think that's what also helped the NFL, the power of sound, not
Mhm.
necessarily seeing the games, it was hearing it, which is pretty cool.
And think of the technology that's advanced as well since then. The type of microphones used to be able to
Yeah.
capture that audio. It's pretty amazing to see. And now it's like we don't think about that anymore, right? Like it's just kind of like built into the game. I always think about I'm not like big into UFC, but when I do watch it and you can hear the sound of like the pads hit somebody's face, unfortunately. I mean, they're there to fight. But I really like when they go to the corner and the coach is talking with them. And there's some really iconic moments. I can't think of Leon something, and his coach is like, "You got to go through the fire. You got to go through the fire." And he ended up winning that. He just got so pumped up that he ended up kicking the guy, and he won that. So
Yeah,
I
20 years ago, not that there were, if there was UFC, you wouldn't have heard that.
right,
You might not have been able to hear that.
sure.
Look at Peyton Manning, Omaha, his Audible Omaha or his fake Audible Omaha. I mean, now he's got a production company, Omaha Productions. So the only way we hear that is because the nat sound of the mics picking up him calling his Audible at the line of scrimmage, Omaha. I
Mhm.
know there's a kid out there, young kid. I don't know, he's early 20s, and he's doing well. He's becoming viral on social media for his impersonation of Aaron Rodgers. Now he's got his movements down to the fake handoff and the way he throws. But to me, what stands out most is his cadence. He's got Aaron Rodgers' cadence down of how he calls the signals. His green 18, and
Green tea.
his and when he calls hut hut, the
Mhm.
guy's he sounds just like him, and the
Yeah.
way he impersonates him. Again, power of sound. But how did the kid pick that up? He picked that up by watching the NFL, and now the mics are so good that you can hear the audibles, um, live on TV, which is really cool. It's really cool to think of. If you're a strategy person, the NFL has become more attractive to watch it on TV because you can hear the audibles, you understand the quarterback is thinking, you hear audibles from the center, you can hear the linebacker calling audibles, you hear all the strategy before every single snap. So thinkers, I think football's become even more attractive because of the power of sound.
Right, and I think that's something that, it brings the audience into intimate moments, and that is one of them, right? It's very close, it's very personal, it's stuff when you watch what our, society wants and demands, it's more authenticity, and it's more intimacy, and it's more, uh, "Take me with you," that kind of thing.
Love that. That's so true. Yeah, man. I mean, we talk about storytelling and authentic storytelling. I love the way you said that. You take me with you. We like to think of it as uh, it's almost like I'm not supposed to be there as a end user, as a viewer and a listener, but I get to sneak in on this meeting, this conversation, this play call in the huddle, this discussion between these people. You can't get more authentic than that. What is the NFL, Tim? What's they do one team a year.
Oh, Hard
Um,
Knocks.
Hard Knocks. Why is that so popular? Because it's as authentic as you're going to get. I mean, these guys know the cameras are around and the microphones are there, but I think sometimes they forget because they just get used to it. Hard Knocks is popular because I'm not supposed to be there.
Mhm.
I'm hearing and seeing things that I usually don't get to hear or see. And that's authenticity. That's authentic, right?
And the moment you get told you can't do something, your mind is like, well, why can't I? I want to. And that's like just those little windows into that kind of thought process.
Yeah, and I think
So
when you can make it feel like this is just for you,
yeah, yes.
right? Right? It's just for us one on one, right? Instead of this is for everybody, you know? It kind of changes the game a little bit, and it's like, it makes it brings a little bit more connection.
Again, you're touching on something, man. I mean, we couldn't agree more than that. More. This is why I think politicians make a mistake a ton of times, or in an advertisement. I hate when they say, "Hey, folks,
Mm,
I'm not a folks. I'm me.
yeah.
Just talk to me. I'm the only person that matters. Be one on one. Have a one on one authentic conversation with me." So don't say folks. You could say the word you. Word you is very powerful. And it's much more intimate than, "Hey, folks, listen." Awful. Go with the individual. Talk to me. When you're talking to someone, just pretend it's one person. And even if you're talking to millions of people, if you pretend you're talking to one person, if you assume it's just one person, then there's a better chance you'll connect with the million people than if you called them all folks.
Yeah.
Folks is not intimate. Folks is not personal.
That's really the only time we'll re-record a story, right? Is when somebody starts off as that. We want it to obviously be a very natural conversation and unscripted, but as soon as we hear that from somebody, we coach them through it and say you. And a lot of people have resonated with that as we work with them over the years. I think that's like a very powerful thing that you brought up, Steve. Power of you and just having that one-on-one conversation.
Yeah. So
The other triggering word, I think, is look. Look,
Look.
folks, look. I'm about to lie to you, folks. Here we go.
Mm,
Look. It's a natural defense. Look.
You know what look reminds me of? It reminds
Mm.
me of like a boss or something like that saying, "Look, guys, we
mm,
need to start doing
mm.
X, Y, and Z." And what do we all do as employees? We just tune out, right? Because it's like, oh boy, here we go again.
Not many good
Great
things
point.
follow look.
Not usually.
Right.
Or my dad saying, "Look, Brandon, how many
Yeah.
times have I told you to clean up your room?" Right?
Just look. Just complete disbelief. So Brandon brought up, how a good narrator, it gives audience that intimate moment. Um, Another thing that I realized, or not realized, but I discovered looking you up, Brandon, and going on your website, which was awesome. As you said, you went from telling stories from behind the bar to behind the microphone,
Right.
and there are people who my brother is a bartender, and he says that he should have a psychology degree because he's always helping people, talking to them, very intimate conversations. Talk to me a little. Has that experience kind of influenced ways that you narrate something, or when you approach a voiceover, trying to push that little intimacy so that, like you said, take me with you?
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So I would say that I almost never push intimacy,
Hmm.
um, in the sense of I'm not trying to put it on, right? I'm trying to come from a place of authenticity that maybe was an experience that I have had, right? And so working at the bar, I worked in the hospitality industry for 15 years, and so I heard lots of stories, man. I mean, why do people come to places like that, right? Celebrations,
Mhm.
camaraderie. They're celebrating their have just got their they just got pregnant, finishing school, bought a home, birthdays, um, also disappointments. Maybe
Mm.
they got laid off. Maybe they lost somebody. I mean, so in a day, you could have experienced so many emotions up and down, right? And you're listening to those, and you're connecting with these people in a way that uh in some ways probably people that they know well don't don't get that side of them. So I would say a lot of and a lot of what that is that when you're in a bar setting or something like that, you see all walks of life, right? And so one of my things that I had to do was kind of be this chameleon to generations. And I would basically adjust the way I spoke, carried myself, and anticipate what they're going to say, and all of that to kind of make them feel comfortable, right? That I'm one of them in a way,
Right.
and I think a lot of that has aided me in my voiceover career because when I'm presented with a story, um, it's my job to tell it truthfully in in this somewhat make believe world, but it's truthful in the story, right? I mean, I'm trying to bring a sense of trust and like we just talked about intimacy, um, and that for most people is very hard to do. I think
Mhm.
it's even hard for voice actors to do, to be honest.
Yeah.
We were talking a little bit about folks and look and things like that.
Yeah.
And one of the beliefs that I have is that when we're speaking to somebody, there are two different ways that we're doing it. One is in the head, and the other is in the heart. And it's almost near impossible to do both at the same time.
Mm.
So we're kind of making this conscious choice or unconscious choice of um, how we're communicating with somebody. So in trying to tell something that a story that's heartfelt that has emotion, it's very hard to come from a place of being logical and being kind of this expert in your head versus being more empathetic and being like, wow, I get that, you
Mm.
know. Um, so having all those stories from the bar days and all of the experiences communicating with different walks of life, has helped me to approach stories from lots of different angles and kind of develop their own backstories, right? When you guys are writing scripts for stories, you know, there's no clear backstory. So as an actor, I have to come up with that backstory that is truthful and that fits what's happening in the story, so then I can come at it from a place that feels very authentic and true to me. And then in that case, that's me talking to one person, and that's me connecting with you.
That's awesome.
Roy
Brandon.
Williams, win the heart, the mind will follow, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
Wizard of Ads, I mean, that's his theme on everything. Yeah, we make decisions based on emotion and justify with logic later. So yeah, if you can connect emotionally, that's if you we are in the business of persuasion.
Yeah.
We are, you know, so we believe the best way to persuade is through emotion, connecting emotionally, which is to us authentic storytelling, utilizing the power of sound. And if you can connect in anything you're selling, whether if you're selling hamburgers or you're selling to a candidate that this is a good place to work, and you want them to apply for a job, you know, you connect on an emotional level and you win that heart, and then they'll justify with logic later, you know. So win the heart, the mind will follow. And we follow that practice. And I mean, really, guys, in everything we do.
Yeah.
Our whole focus is figuring out how to connect emotionally. So what you were talking about, Brandon, really hits us. Yeah, perfect. I mean, that's really neat from the angle that you're talking about. You're you're saying if I'm reading it right, if I'm hearing you right, so you need to figure out a way to get into that character so that it becomes authentic. And you need to say to yourself or create your own backstory like it's your real life. That's the only way for it to be authentic is if it really is you, even though it's not you, but you've convinced yourself it is you, and it's your authentic self inside this character. So then as you're having this, whatever it is you're doing in this particular situation, and you're connecting with me, an end user one-on-one, because I'm really buying in on an emotional level to what you're saying, which may help whatever it is. Maybe it's you're helping, I'm buying into what you're talking about. So now I'm going to pay more attention and I'm going to learn more because it's an internal thing for some business. Maybe it's an ad. So I'm going to buy in more. I'm connecting. I'm like, I feel this. I can feel your authenticity and I'm emotionally connected to that. So I may buy that product or service, whatever it is that you're also persuading in everything you do. You're persuading me, right? You're persuading me to do whatever it is you want us to do, whatever the assignment is. But you're doing that by connecting to me authentically, which to me, that's even more difficult to do because it's not really you. I mean, you're becoming that. It shows the power of acting. So it's really cool to hear from your angle. So we believe in obviously authenticity, right? So when we talk to our clients, we want them involved. We work with small businesses, right? So they're right here on Main Street. They're not on Wall Street. So when we talk to them, we want them to tell their story, but we don't want to tell it for them. We
Right.
want them to tell it. We want the owner or the operator to tell their story, or the person on the salesperson to tell their story, or whoever's involved. We want all the stakeholders involved in this company to tell their story in their words, in their way, and then we'll edit it together in a way that so that in story form. Um, but and it's difficult for them because you know they can get nervous, and it's a skill, it's an art form to get them relaxed to tell it in their words. Like, don't worry, you can use and the, you can it doesn't have to be perfect. And but you have to be that person, and you're not even that person. That's pretty cool. So you have to take yourself into that as an actor. How do you just prepare yourself by pretending that their story is your story? Or how do you make that happen? How do you make me believe that this is you? Because it's hard to find good actors, very difficult to find good actors. So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think every story is different, right? Every story is different. Even if you look at it and you're like, oh yeah, this is a heartfelt moment about cancer. Got it. Okay. I know what I'm going to do. Right. It's not true. There's a lot of, because you could tell the same story in so many different ways, and you'll feel different hearing it in each way. So, I think it's approaching a story and finding this kind of, uh, pre-life or backstory behind why is the story even being told, right? Why did the copywriter want to write this story? What does the brand really want from this? What are they trying to um, get somebody to do or to feel, or all those different things? And there's lots of clues, right? Just written in the story is the word um, love in there somewhere. There is it a brand talking about how proud they are? I mean, there's like so many clues within the copy itself to give us actors, some in on, like, okay, so what is the story really about? And then once we know that, it's like, okay, so what were they doing just before they started telling the story?
Mm.
And that helps us be like, okay, I now know where I am in place and time and what's happening. Like, we're actually at a coffee shop. It's 9 a.m. Things are starting to pick up, getting busy. People are walking by. I mean, you can get really specific and drill it down that way. So then when you're telling the story as an actor, if it feels like you're trying to tell the story, something's wrong. If it's effortless, it's true. And
Well,
so if it comes out in a way that, and I'm sure you've heard this before, where you've had voiceover talent, you listen to an audition or something like that, and you're like, oh man, I can totally tell they're coming from a place of their head, right? Where they're like, I'm doing this thing. Hey folks, listen up, that sort of thing, versus like, they're sunken down, they're really connected to it, and they're just effortlessly telling the story as it was written.
Hmm.
well, I mean, what you're getting me to when I say it's it's hard to find that good actor, I think it's because it's not has nothing to do. It's because a lot of what you hear in audio ads or in even on in small market television ads or middle market television ads, they're not actors. That's my point, is they don't go to people like you. They just say, well, okay, here's the script. Um, my niece, she's wonderful, and she's going to go ahead and uh, she'll be the customer, and then and they'll use just not voiceover actors, but very good, great vocals, production voiceover talent, right? They're not actors,
Mhm.
all right, and that creates it's just zero credibility. It's really poorly executed, and I think a lot of less expensive, but in the long run is more expensive, right? And because you're not going to get the results that you want because there's no credibility in the ad. The acting's really bad and the script isn't any good either,
Mm.
right? The other thing I found when I've worked with voice actors is they're like, "Hey, do you mind if this is more real. This is more authentic. Can I?" Of course.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, that's somebody you're not really going to get that from your niece.
Right.
She's going to read the script. And so I really encourage anybody, if you're handling the advertising yourself in these middle markets and small market or whatever it is, at least look into try to find local voiceover acting talent, and especially in radio. I mean, you've heard the ads, and right away you say that's an ad. Ads don't have to sound like ads.
That's true.
Ads
Yeah.
can just be a conversation. It can be, I'm like we've talked about before, it can be I'm listening to something that I feel like I shouldn't be listening to. It's some authentic conversation going on, and I'm really connected to it on an emotional level, right? It happened to be an ad, but I didn't have to think of it as an ad.
Yeah, I think that's what's interesting is that, if you take something like that and then you take something that, major brands are doing, right, on TV, right? A lot of those don't sound like ads, right? because you could pull that story word for word and use it anywhere almost, because they haven't even said the name of their brand, or they may not even have said the product. They're just telling a story, right? That helps you feel connected to their brand as a whole, right? And I think even as small businesses, that is still something that's possible. Whether it's a voice actor or it's somebody within the company. I think that we're not that everyone has a great voice, and when it comes to the power of sound, um, I'm not bringing, I'm not coming into anything thinking I need to give something a sound, because the sound is already there. It's about bringing the emotion to it, and bringing the storytelling and the truth behind it. And everyone can get there. Like when you guys have interviews with, and you're doing on camera stuff, and you got somebody who's nervous. Maybe it's the owner, and it's like, okay, this guy's stiff. Like we need to loosen him up. And it's like, maybe what you're doing is you're trying to get him to feel something, because if he feels something, then that is going to come out in the story that he's telling, right? And I think that's the power of sound, right? You want to listen to his story, right?
Yeah, I love the comment that everyone has a good voice. You know why? Because it's their voice.
Exactly.
You know,
Unique.
it's real. And if and I always tell everybody, you may sell the same product or service as your competition. You might have 5 other competitors in your market, but what they don't have that you have is you. They don't have your story, and to your point, they don't have your voice. You are unique. You need to own your uniqueness. Be real. Be you. Connect with the community by being authentic.
Yeah.
That's going to be the separator between you and the other guys, unless you're going to be the lowest price, if that's the way you want to go. And that's what most smaller businesses end up doing. They focus on price. They mention their business 3 times because that's what you're told to do. They're conveniently located in business since 1979, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think getting over the some of the ideas that authenticity is boring, because that's not true. That's exactly what we all want. Like as consumers, that is what we want. Because every day we're shown stuff that is fake or that is pushy. I mean, I know, like AI, for example, is everywhere, right? And I know we're all sick of a lot of that stuff, whether it's visual or audio or whatever. And we're just like, man, is anybody going to tell us the truth around here?
Mhm.
So true. So true. Now we're to the point where we're doubting video. Like,
Yeah.
is that real? Because it's just 2 years ago. I mean, if there's video, it's video evidence. Now it could be not real video evidence. Isn't that
Hmm.
crazy? Like, oh, I don't even know if this is real. I wonder if that's going to kill social media, because anything you see, you don't know if it's real anymore. Or hear, you don't know if it's real. Someone
Yeah.
says something like, that's that person. No, it's not. It's AI sounding like that person.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe what ends up happening is we end up having more in-person interactions because of that, and our circles in our worldwide social life become a little smaller, or
Mhm.
or they become more direct, right? Instead of sharing a photo on Instagram, you're sharing it directly with a small community that you've built, that now that's your audience versus the whole world.
I like that a lot. They could hear you talk rather than just see words that you typed out onto a blog.
Hmm.
There's that connection that we're talking about, where the more direct we are, the more we are listening to each other and hearing them rather than just sending emails or text messages back and forth. So it's a really cool thought to think about how technology is going to help us, but it may actually push us into wanting to help each other more.
I
Just
mean, that was kind of the idea with Clubhouse, right? Did you guys ever use that?
Mm. I downloaded it, but never ended up using it. I remember it was like hard to get. You had to get like a code or an invite
Oh
from
yeah, you
somebody.
had to know somebody.
Yeah, you
a,
had to know somebody. Yep.
like a
Yep.
real clubhouse.
Yeah.
But then Twitter Spaces kind of took over that technology, right? I don't think they bought them out, but that was like the birth of Spaces, these live audio conversations where you get to know the person behind the profile picture, and a lot of really interesting conversations happen on there now, I think, because of what Clubhouse did. Um, just this giant group chat, but audio, in audio format.
We may be going more long form though, because don't know any truth to this, but I would assume it's what happens is anything in long form is turned to short form, right? We repurpose, and it's easier to alter short form than a 2 hour conversation. I don't know. Right, because we want short for that's so short for everything's 15, 20 seconds, and then I buy into it and I move on to the next thing, and then the algorithm serves me another thing, kind of like Brandon said, you say the same thing 50 times, but it could have 50 different meanings to you or different
Interpretations.
connect to you 50 different ways, and it feeds you. They can keep feeding you altered stuff, but if it's a long form thing, maybe that's not as altered in the future as short form. Just thinking out loud. Yeah,
That
because
makes sense.
no one's gonna sit there for 2 hours on,
I
you know,
think people are gonna want more context to where a sound bite came from now. I
Mhm.
think there's just so much of that, and things get taken out of context in these 30-second, 60-second clips where people want to be more informed and they want the truth with things. So, depending on obviously the topic and the person that's speaking, they will take that time to listen to something. Maybe that's an hour or 2 hour. I mean, look at podcasts. I mean, those haven't been deleted yet. People still are very much into podcasts. Um, but I think because we're in this world of that constant dopamine loop of the short form stuff, that people are finally picking up on, like, oh, that's why I don't have any energy right now, because I was scrolling on, Instagram or TikTok for, hours on end. And I think there's truth into that, because you watch so many of these videos that you don't even end up knowing what you just consumed. So these long forms, whether it's YouTube videos or podcasts, I think we're going to kind of go back into that uh, type of space, really more for just the mental break with all of the short form content that's out there right now.
Yeah, and I think it's the connection too, because when you have something longer form, you have a longer time to connect to somebody or to a story. And this made me think of back in March. I was in New York and I was speaking at the New York Film Academy to a bunch of Gen Z folks. Look what I just did.
There we are.
Uh, 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 anyways, and we started talking about content, and they're all aspiring filmmakers and things like that, and almost all of them said they prefer long form content. They're like, I could spend 2 hours watching some video on YouTube and just be totally into whatever this creator's doing. They could be doing anything, but it's the stories that they're telling that they're so connected to. And I just found it so interesting when I felt like the world was going towards short form video. And it's like, okay, but these people are the ones that are the future, and they're saying they want the long form stuff. So I think that's really interesting.
which goes back to what you talked about earlier. It's because they want authenticity. They want
Right.
real.
Exactly.
They want the real thing. And if you're editing things up, cutting it short, that's not the real thing.
And Jamie, to your point about finding out where the sound is, finding out where the sounds come from, if you look at some of the top TikTok or Instagram accounts out there, some of those accounts are dedicated to finding the original sounds for different clips, right? Because we all want to be like, so that little soundbite has been used 1.4 million times. What's the story behind that? And somebody's out there discovering that, sharing that story, and people love that
I
because
know
they
I'm
get to go where they can't go, right?
sure,
Yep.
Yeah.
sure. And I am especially interested in that sort of stuff, because as somebody that was, I haven't made music as, in recent times, but a while back, very big into like record shopping, getting old vinyl, and then taking the sounds from there and recreating the music in my own way, like in a hip hop style format. And I love when I hear a sample on, like, let's just say it's like a mainstream song or a well, just a well-known song, and I can pinpoint where that sample came from. Or utilizing certain, there's like a website out there, it's called Who Sampled, and you
Oh,
can
yeah.
literally find where that original sample came from. And it's amazing to see where, like, different parts of the world, songs that you've probably heard of hundreds of times and didn't realize that the sample is from that. And mind you, this is only, like, when it comes to a sample, it's only 10 to 12 seconds that somebody can use from that original song to make a beat out of it, and that, which ends up becoming its own song. But TikTok and Instagram, they are geniuses for coming up with that, like, sound library where you could use the viral sounds, and then you can save them, and then you can see all of the videos that use that sound, and really incredible stuff.
Yeah.
Really incredible. I wish I had like a whole sound bank of everything. I mean, it would take forever to get just a. Are you familiar with any of those kind of machines that I'm talking about? Drum
Yeah.
machines?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a certain patience when it comes to that, right? Just being able to do that research, finding out where it came from, and then also literally like saving that sort of stuff. But I
You
can go
know,
on and on
you
about
might
that.
you might appreciate this. So the other day I was I told you I listen to like 1940s music and stuff. That's like
Yes.
my jam
Yeah.
right now. So what randomly popped up here was was this song.
I don't know if can you hear it, guys?
I can't hear it.
Hmm. Mike's
It's
not
not
picking
coming
up.
through the mic.
That's not coming through. Oh, well,
Mm.
anyways, maybe that's one of the settings on Zoom. Anyways,
Yeah.
um,
That's okay.
it was like an intro to like a Dr. Dre song, but
Oh,
this was
Mm.
okay.
the original like piece from like the 40s, right? And so
Wow. From
Piano,
the
like from Still
40s.
Dre.
that's the original. That's where that
Nice.
came from.
Wow.
So it like makes sense, and you're like, oh, okay. They didn't reinvent the wheel. They just used something from the past,
Sure.
which I think is amazing. So
I think when a lot of people hear sound, they think of instruments. And Brandon, your instrument is your voice.
right.
So talk to us about how you practice or refine your instrument because, musicians are always trying to get better. They're always working on their craft. Talk to us. So, for like example, if you're between gigs, do you just maybe read an old script to practice, or just kind of how do you approach that?
Yeah. So when I think of practicing and using my instrument and that sort of thing,
Mhm.
and because 80% of the work that I book is just using my natural voice, my normal voice, I don't have to like create character voices normally,
Right.
but sometimes I do.
Mhm.
And in that case, yes, I would totally be practicing impressions and practicing creating new character voices and things like that.
Mhm.
But just my normal voice and how to um, kind of explore it more, right? Because our voices are really complex,
Yeah.
and you can, the range of our voices. Most of us don't even really realize how far we can take the range of our voice. So, yeah, absolutely, I will grab pieces of copy that I have, and I'll tell stories in different ways. I may make slight adjustments and like with my pitch or the tone, um, and just you know try to see what it sounds like, while still staying in this kind of authenticity, that I'm trying to bring to it. So, um, but yeah, when it comes to practice, I mean, like, and I'm always coaching too. That's the other thing too.
Mhm.
Like, just like an athlete, athletes, don't get to a certain spot where they say they've made it and stop coaching.
Right.
And that's very true in an actor's world where it's like, you know, uh, coming in as a voice actor, it's like I'm always going to be coaching. And so I work with different coaches throughout the year as well to kind of keep my acting skills um, up to par. So
That's-
Smart.
Do you have any, I know this is a quick turnaround. Do you have any ideas of maybe something you've discovered with your voice recently that you kind of were blown away with and now that you incorporate more with your work?
Okay, this I don't know if this is exactly the power of sound, but I would say that
Mhm.
this is a result. This is something that would come from this type of work I'm about to explain here. So I
Yeah.
recently worked with a coach, and they they're a casting director, and they work with major brands and to produce what are known as mini films, right? Because that's what major brands are creating. They're creating mini films. They're not creating advertisements.
Mhm.
And when we were working together, I said that I've been in counseling, marriage counseling. Not that anything was wrong with our relationship, but it's we just wanted to strengthen our connection with each other.
Yeah.
And for those that are listening, it's all about communication. um, but what I found is that when I was connecting to my wife and when we were talking about certain things in those sessions, I get this feeling in the pit of my stomach where not in a bad way, just a feeling where I just felt vulnerable. And that instantly made me connect to this coaching session I had with this casting director when we were coaching and I was telling this story from a really authentic place. I got that same feeling in my stomach where I felt like I was being vulnerable in that moment. And it was like an instant light bulb went off for me where it's like when I'm fully connected to something and when I'm fully connected to somebody, I get the feeling that I'm connected. And so for me, that was kind of a big breakthrough. So when I told a story, it was no longer from this place of like presentation. It was from sunken down, relaxed, and just telling the story. And that to me was something where the sound was so different.
Mm.
You could clearly, if you didn't know me and you heard the two different ways that it was done, one you would tune out, and the other you would be like coming in to listen a little bit more, right?
Right.
And that was a big breakthrough for me.
So using your own actual emotions can help trigger everyone else's emotions when listening to you, kind
Yeah,
of.
I feel like that's true in our everyday lives, that if you
Mhm.
feel it, other people feel it, right?
Right.
If somebody's coming to you and they're telling you something tragic, right? If they're saying they just got diagnosed with something major, they're not usually doing it terribly casually, right?
Right. Yeah.
They're like, "Yeah, I just got cancer." No, So
Yeah.
anyways, you want to head to the game? And it's like, no,
Mm.
that's not usually what's happening. Usually it's like it's hard for them to talk about,
Even yeah.
and their pace is slower, their breathing is slower, their maybe their voice is shaking a little bit, and that brings you to their level, right?
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
you're now on the same level. They're feeling vulnerable, you're receiving the vulnerability there, and it's I feel like in advertising, in voiceover and all that, that's the same kind of thing that happens, is that you're being pulled down to the same level if the story is connected.
Good stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So we're almost wrapping up here. So Jamie and Steve, is there any questions that you have for Brandon that you thought of? Because then I have two more of my fun ones that I have to
Mhm.
pose to him.
I'll jump in when you're done with your questions because I had one and then I kind of lost it right now.
Okay. So for someone who looks like a 16-year-old trying to grow facial hair for the first time, I must ask about these mustache competitions that I saw that you were in.
Yes.
I saw the Billy the Butcher one. Do you
Uh-huh.
have any other costumes you've been, or is he maybe one of your favorites?
That is one of the favorites.
Yeah.
But I did one a couple years ago where I was the walrus from Alice in Wonderland. And because I had a walrus mustache, so it was really big, and it was, I mean, yeah, there's no question you knew what character I was.
Right.
Um, and so that was a fun one, and that was probably the most recent memorable one. All the
Mhm.
other ones have been that kind of Bill the Butcher kind of style, just because I was rocking the imperial mustache, and
Mhm.
that's the same kind of mustache style he has in the film. So
Nice.
yeah,
And to touch on the one part where I brought up practice, on your website under the
yeah,
e-learning technical medical,
yes.
isoprenoid biosynthesis example, isopepnyl diphosphate substrate. How long did it take you to memorize those when you were coming up with that that example bite?
Well,
And is that one of the
yeah,
bigger challenges is when you get handed, scripts where words you might not have even thought could exist?
yeah. Well, I do a lot of that stuff. So a
Yeah.
lot of medical narration. I get hired a lot to do that stuff, and it is difficult, just like
Hmm.
anybody else, right? I mean, it is difficult. I still have to look up how to say the words correctly.
Yeah.
I mean, I recently did a project on pulmonary hypertension, and I mean, I know just about everything there's to know about that now, but there's a lot of major technical terms that need to be said properly. Otherwise, you lose credibility,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because the doctors are listening to this stuff, right?
Right.
People who are in that field know how to say that stuff. So if they're hearing something that's not said properly, then that's a major problem, right? Because you think about it yourself, right? If you heard an e-learning project and you're just like, oh gosh, this guy doesn't even know what he's talking about, can't even say the word right,
Click
So
next.
in those fields, it is imperative that it is said correctly.
Awesome.
So yes, it takes time to learn. Some come easier than others. I mean, when I was younger, I would make up words all the time that didn't mean anything, but I could say it in a very confident, authoritative way, and you'd
Yeah.
believe it. And they'd be like, "I no, I didn't know that,"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yeah, it's because it's not real." So,
Right. That's
uh,
good stuff. Shane?
Brandon, I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to join us on Sidewalk Talk. This was awesome. I mean, we could talk about the power of sound all day, storytelling. I'm sure we'll have another conversation again. But just wanted to thank you and really appreciate it.
yeah, no, thanks for having me. I really appreciate you offering this.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I like it's great talking to you because we hear, it makes us feel good that like, hey, there's somebody else that has the same beliefs as us, but you come at it from a different angle. And so it's an angle that we're not professional. We're not actors. My daughters are in plays. That's as close as I get, and they're in eighth grade and sixth grade. So that's as close as I get to acting and understanding acting. So to hear it from your angle, in that you really we're on the same page
Mhm.
on everything, and to hear what you do, your thought process when you take on a role or a project, it's really cool. And so I thank you for being authentic and sharing that with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I appreciate definitely, you like I definitely feel like we're on the same wavelength when it comes to the power of sound, and I absolutely uh, think this is fantastic that we're able to come at it from different angles, but kind of meet in the middle at the power of sound.
It's an awesome Venn diagram. All right. I wanted to thank you for listening. Brandon, again, can't thank you enough and look forward to talking to you all next time.